So you want to play the hot new remaster of Age of Empires AoE 4, but you're still rocking an aging Intel Core CPU. In this video, we're going to see how the game runs in a 2nd generation i3, and we're going to test it out with a few different video cards. For the tests, I'm using the i3 system I built a few months ago. This PC has the earliest and possibly slowest desktop processor to have the minimum required instruction sets to run AoE 4. It's the Sandy Bridge i3-2100 released in February of 2011, so more than 10 years ago. The GPU in it is a Geforce GTX 285, a powerful GPU from January 2009, so more than 12 years old by now. At the time it was released, this was a flagship video card capable of maxing out most of the games, but unfortunately the game doesn't even start on it. So let's go to our second video card I planned for the experiment, the GTX 580. Alright, so now the game does start and it's actually playable with this video card from November 2010. The monitor I'm using is 1680x1050 and the game recommends some scaling on top of that, so don't expect to play it in Full HD or anything with this video card. So yeah, one loss, one win so far. If you play with suggested settings, the game runs at over 80 FPS in 1680x1050 with some scaling on top of that. But it's an okay experience. I could play this for quite a while and have a good time while doing it. Since I was getting high frame rates, I tried running it at the native resolution with medium settings, but that was too much for the GTX 580 with 1.5GB of VRAM. On the other hand, keeping the graphical detail on low and running without scaling worked well. With the setup, the MSI Afterburner on-screen displays telling us that the GPU is still the bottleneck and there's some headroom for the CPU, so we can experiment with a video card that's a bit newer. Let's try the GTX 960. Of course, this video card is much newer. It was released in 2015, it's got 2GB of GDDR5, and hopefully that's enough to run the game on medium settings without scaling. So despite the warning on the game menu, you can still choose higher settings and not use any scaling. Surprisingly, the i3 with the GTX 960 does just fine in 1680x1050 with medium settings. You can probably run this in Full HD using low settings if you want. The i3-2100 we're using has only 2 cores, but it does have hyperthreading, so it runs on 4 threads and it's clocked at 3.1 GHz. Don't get me wrong, this CPU is no slouch when it comes to games from its time period. Actually, it can run most of those games in maximum settings, but when we're talking about a game released 10 years later, this is surprising. I didn't think the game would run this well with the Sandy Bridge i3. As for the game, it's great. It has a bit of simplicity of the early Age of Empire games with updated graphics. In the campaign, they have included cinematic representation of historic battles, and it's a pleasure to watch those. I highly recommend it if you're into AoE games. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you're into Sandy Bridge CPUs, check out this video where we did some comparisons with a quad-channel Sandy Bridge E and the prior generation triple-channel Xeon.